They called Dong Minjun a monster in expensive clothing, a man who never softened and never saved anyone unless it benefited him. But even monsters heard certain sounds. In a ballroom full of laughter and champagne, a tiny cry rose above the music. One child's pain in a room of people who had everything. Minjun followed it without knowing that one small act of kindness was about to change his entire life. Welcome, my beautiful family. We have loads of interesting stories lined up just for you. So if you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe, like and comment where in the world you are watching. Now let's begin. Dong Minjun stood near one of the towering pillars, flawless in a black suit that fit like armor. His expression was calm, almost bored, like a man watching a performance he'd paid for but didn't care to enjoy. To the room, he was just another high-status guest. To the men shadowing him at a careful distance, he was something else entirely. Minjun's phone vibrated once. A message. The kind that didn't arrive unless there was blood behind it. He turned slightly, angled away from curious eyes, and started to step toward a quieter corridor to take the call. And then he heard it. A small, broken sound, soft enough that most people would miss it, but sharp enough to cut straight through the string music. Not drunken laughter. Not a bride's happy tears. Not the harmless drama weddings always collected. This was a child crying the way children cried when they were trying not to cry at all. Minjun paused. His men paused with him, watching his face for instructions. But Minjun wasn't looking at them anymore. He was listening. The sound came again, muffled, trembling, somewhere behind the marble columns, where the light from the chandeliers didn't quite reach. Minjun moved without speaking. He followed it past the edge of the dance floor, past the floral arches, past a corridor marked for staff only. He rounded the column, and there she was. A little black girl, no older than 6, sitting tight against the base of the pillar like she was trying to disappear into the wood and marble. Her hair was braided neatly back from her face, but tears ran down her cheeks anyway. She wore a pale yellow dress that should have looked joyful, except she was holding her stomach like it hurt to breathe. Minjun lowered himself into a crouch, careful, slow. A man like him didn't bend for anyone. Yet he did it without thinking. "Hey," he said, voice quieter than the music. "What's wrong?" The girl flinched like she expected to be yelled at. She wiped at her face with the back of her hand, trying to swallow the sound before it escaped again. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm not supposed to be here." Minjun's eyes narrowed, not at her, but at the idea that a child could be so afraid in a room full of celebration. "What's your name?" "Mia." "It's okay, Mia. You're not in trouble." Mia's lips trembled. She shook her head fast, like she didn't believe adults when they promised safety. "Please don't tell my mama," she blurted. "She needs this job. She's working. She's already tired." Something cold and unfamiliar settled in Minjun's chest. In his world, people begged for mercy when they were guilty. Mia was begging for her mother when she'd done nothing wrong. Minjun glanced toward the ballroom, toward the smiling guests and the overflowing food stations that no one was even finishing. Then he looked back at Mia. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Mia shook her head, but her hands tightened over her stomach, fingers digging into the fabric of her dress. "My tummy hurts," she admitted, voice cracking. "It hurts so much." Minjun held her gaze, steady. "Why does it hurt?" She hesitated, like saying it out loud might make it real. "I'm hungry." The words landed harder than any threat he'd received that week. Minjun's jaw tightened. "When did you last eat?" Mia's voice went smaller. "Yesterday." The next breath she took was shaky. "At school." Minjun didn't move for a second. Not because he didn't know what to do, but because he suddenly saw the room differently. Here, where a single centerpiece could pay someone's rent, a child was sitting on cold marble with an empty stomach and tears she was trying to hide so her mother wouldn't lose a job. He reached behind him without taking his eyes off Mia, making a subtle gesture. One of his men appeared instantly, like he'd been summoned from the shadows. Minjun spoke in Korean, low and firm. Food. Now. Something gentle. Bread, fruit, warm rice if you can. Water. And make it look normal. His man nodded once and vanished back into the crowd. Mia stared at Minjun like she couldn't decide if he was real or another adult who would walk away. You don't have to, she started. I'm going to, Minjun said simply. He slipped off his suit jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame, warm and heavy, like protection she didn't expect. Food is coming, he told her. You're going to be okay. Mia's eyes flicked down to the jacket. But I don't have money. Minjun almost smiled. Almost. That's not your problem. To keep her from sinking back into fear, he asked, Do you like school? Mia nodded cautiously. I like drawing. What do you draw? Flowers, she whispered. And houses. Houses. Mia shrugged, embarrassed. Big ones. With stairs. Minjun's throat tightened in a way he didn't understand. In his world, houses were weapons. Fortresses. Places people died to own. To Mia, a big house was just a dream that looked safe. Within minutes, his man returned with a small plate and a glass of water, delivered discreetly as if it were the most ordinary request in the world. Mia's eyes widened. That's for me, she asked. Minjun nodded. Every bite. She ate carefully at first, polite, like she'd been taught manners even when she had nothing. Then the hunger took over. She chewed too fast, swallowed too hard, and tears slipped down again, not from pain this time but from relief. Minjun stayed beside her the whole time, watching the color return to her cheeks, watching her shoulders loosen, watching her breathe like she wasn't fighting her body anymore. And then, just as Mia finally sat back, wiping her mouth with a napkin like she wanted to prove she belonged in this room, Minjun felt it. That shift in the air. The instinct that had saved him 100 times in darker places. He looked up. A woman stood a few feet away, frozen mid-step, her eyes locked on him with a shock so sharp it made the entire ballroom behind her feel like a blur. She wore a formal dress, hair pulled back, posture straight like she was holding herself together by force. Minjun's breath stopped. Because he knew that face. He knew those eyes. And he hadn't seen them in years. Sonia. For a heartbeat, the Mafia boss who never hesitated couldn't move at all. And that was how the past found him, on polished marble, beside a little girl in a yellow dress, at a wedding that suddenly didn't feel like a celebration anymore. Because before Minjun could ask why Sonia was here, his mind latched onto the only question that mattered. Who was Mia to her? And why did Mia's face feel like a memory he couldn't escape? The last time Minjun saw Sonia, he was still just Minjun. And the choice he made that night built the empire that now threatened to destroy them all. Sonia stood a few feet away, frozen mid-step, like her body had forgotten how to move. For a heartbeat, the ballroom didn't exist. The chandeliers, the orchestra, the perfume-thick air, everything blurred into a distant smear of light and sound. Dong Minjun heard only the rush of blood in his ears and the soft, uneven breaths of the child beside him. Sonia's eyes locked on his. Not curiosity. Not confusion. Recognition. Her lips parted slightly, as if his name had slipped to the edge of her tongue and died there. Her fingers tightened around the tray she held. She'd been carrying something, he realized, like she'd been working. Like she didn't belong among the guests in their polished laughter. And then the tray shook. Sonia swallowed hard. Her chest rose once, twice, too fast, like she'd been punched from the inside. No. Her mind screamed it even as her eyes betrayed her. No. Not him. Not here. Minjun watched her face transform in slow motion. He'd seen fear on people, true fear, the kind that made men beg and women collapse. This wasn't that. This was the look of someone staring at a ghost. Sonia's throat tightened. Heat rushed behind her eyes, but she refused to blink. She couldn't. Because the moment she blinked, he might disappear again the way he had years ago, swallowed by night and lies and the promise that he was doing it for her safety. She had told herself he was dead. Not because she had proof, but because it was easier than believing he'd chosen the darkness and never looked back. And now here he was, kneeling on marble like an ordinary man, his suit jacket around a little girl's shoulders, his hand resting lightly on the child's arm as if he had the right to be gentle. How can you be here? Sonia thought. How can you look human? Minjun stood slowly, as if rising too quickly might shatter whatever fragile reality had formed between them. For the first time in a long time, shock showed on his face without permission. It softened the sharp lines of him. It made him look younger. Like the Minjun she once knew, before he became Dong Minjun, a name whispered like a curse. Sonia, he said, voice low. Just one word. It hit her like a door slamming shut. Years collapsed. A cheap apartment with peeling paint. The smell of instant noodles and rain-soaked laundry. Minjun sitting at the edge of her bed, hands trembling as he counted bruises on his own knuckles. Sonia pressing ice to his swollen lip, furious and scared all at once. You can't keep doing this, she told him. You're going to get killed. I'm trying to get us out, he'd said, eyes red from exhaustion. Just one more job. Then we leave. We go somewhere no one knows my name. She'd believed him. God, she had believed him. She'd saved money in an envelope taped under a drawer. She'd drawn maps in her head, bus routes, train stations, places where the air felt clean and no one watched the door. Then there was that night. The night the city felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Minjun had shown up in a crisp shirt that didn't belong to him, hair combed back, jaw set hard enough to crack stone. Sonia remembered touching his sleeve, realizing it was expensive, realizing he'd stepped closer to something dangerous. We leave tonight, she'd whispered. Please. Minjun, now. He'd held her face like he wanted to memorize it. And then he'd said the sentence that broke her. I can't. Her heart had stopped. What do you mean, you can't? His eyes had been full of something that looked like grief. They won't let me. Who? She demanded, voice shaking. Who won't let you? He'd looked past her, toward the window, toward the world that had already claimed him. I owe them. And if I run, they'll come for you. So you're staying? Sonia had choked out. You're choosing them over me. I'm choosing you, he'd said, voice raw. This is how I protect you. She had slapped him. Not for the pain, she had never wanted to hurt him, but because she needed him to feel how impossible his words were. Minjun had turned away, shoulders stiff, and when he walked out that door, he didn't look back. And Sonia had spent years punishing herself for still loving him after that. Now, in this ballroom, he was looking at her like he had never left. Sonia's breath broke. She took one step forward, then two, then she was moving fast, the instinct stronger than fear. Mia, she said, voice sharp with panic. Mia, come here. Mia turned, eyes wide, and for a second her small face flickered with guilt, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. But Sonia didn't scold her. She dropped to her knees and pulled Mia into her arms so tightly the child squeaked. Are you okay? Sonia whispered urgently, scanning her face, her dress, her hands. Did you get hurt? What happened? I was hungry, Mia mumbled into her shoulder. My tummy hurt. Sonia's eyes squeezed shut. Shame rose like bile. Oh, baby. Mia shifted in her arms and Sonia felt it, Mia's body still warm under Minjun's jacket. Sonia pulled back just enough to see it draped around her daughter like a blanket. Sonia's gaze snapped to Minjun again. He stood there, hands at his sides, as still as a statue. Behind him, his men hovered at the edges of the room, pretending they weren't watching. Pretending they weren't armed. Mia clung to Sonia, but she didn't shrink away from Minjun. She peeked around her mother's shoulder, eyes curious now that the hunger had eased. He gave me food, Mia whispered, as if confessing. He was nice. Sonia swallowed hard. She could barely get air into her lungs. She wanted to say 1,000 things. Why are you here? How dare you? What did you become? Instead, she forced her voice into something stiff, controlled. Thank you, she said, for helping her. It came out cold. Not because she wasn't grateful, God, she was, but because warmth toward him felt like a door she couldn't afford to open. Minjun's eyes flicked down to Mia. And Sonia saw it, the way his gaze sharpened. The way he looked at Mia like he was searching for something he didn't want to find. He noticed details men like him always noticed. Mia's eyes weren't just brown. They were the same dark, steady brown he saw in the mirror. Mia's nose wrinkled when she sniffed, the same way his did when he tried not to cry as a boy. And when Mia lifted her hand to wipe her cheek, she did it with the back of her knuckles, quick, stubborn, like weakness was something to erase before anyone saw. Minjun's throat worked once. Sonia felt her stomach drop. No, she thought instantly. Don't you dare look at her like that. Sonia tightened her grip on Mia and began to stand. Come on, she murmured. We're leaving. Mia hesitated. Her eyes darted to Minjun. Mia started, then stopped, as if she wasn't sure what she was allowed to say. It's okay, Sonia insisted. Too fast. We're fine. Minjun stepped forward just half a pace, voice low enough that no one else would hear. Sonia, he said again. Wait. Sonia's shoulders went rigid. She didn't turn fully toward him, like facing him head-on would break something inside her. We need to talk, Minjun said quietly. Not a command. Not a threat. Something worse. A request. Sonia's laugh came out sharp and humorless. We don't. Minjun's jaw tightened. His eyes dropped to Mia again, one more quick assessment, and suspicion flickered there like a match struck in darkness. Please, he said, softer. Just 2 minutes. Sonia's fingers trembled around Mia's small hand. Her heart hammered so hard she could taste it. 2 minutes could become 10. 10 could become a conversation. A conversation could become the kind of weakness that got people killed in his world. And Sonia had spent too many years keeping Mia safe to gamble now. She shook her head. No. Then, before she could change her mind, before his voice could pull her back into the past, Sonia turned and walked away, Mia beside her, still wrapped in Minjun's jacket like a secret. Mia looked back over her shoulder once, eyes meeting Minjun's. Minjun didn't move. He just watched them go, the noise of the ballroom rushing back in around him like water filling a grave. And for the first time in years, Dong Minjun, who never hesitated, who never lost control, stood in the middle of a celebration feeling something he hadn't felt since he was a poor boy with nothing. Shaken. Because the woman he buried in his memory had returned. And the child who walked away with her looked too much like the life he never got to have. Minjun didn't follow them. He stood exactly where Sonia had left him, the echo of her refusal still ringing louder than the orchestra. Around him, the wedding resumed its rhythm, laughter rising, glasses clinking, the illusion of joy snapping neatly back into place as if nothing fragile had just passed through the room. But Minjun felt off balance, like the floor beneath the marble had shifted and only he had noticed. He lifted a hand slightly. That was all it took. One of his men drifted closer, head inclined, eyes alert but careful not to draw attention. Watch the room, Minjun said under his breath. Not her. Everything else. The man nodded once. He understood immediately. Surveillance didn't always mean people. Sometimes it meant exits. Corners. Who lingered too long. Who watched instead of celebrated. Minjun's gaze found Mia again. She was halfway across the ballroom now, Sonia guiding her through the crowd with a hand pressed firmly at her back. Mia moved obediently, but her head kept turning. Not nervously, curiously. As if she were memorizing him the way children memorized things that felt important but didn't yet have names. Minjun told himself to look away. He didn't. Mia paused when Sonia stopped to accept a tray from another staff member. For a brief moment, the child slipped free of her mother's grip and turned fully toward Minjun. She lifted her hand. A small wave. Hesitant. Almost shy. Minjun's body reacted before his mind did. His fingers twitched. His hand lifted in response. Slow, careful. Then he stopped himself. Too late. Mia's face lit up anyway, a quick smile flashing like a secret shared. Then Sonia was tugging her along again, unaware of the exchange. Minjun's chest tightened painfully. It means nothing, he told himself. Children are friendly. Faces repeat themselves. The world is full of coincidences. But the lie tasted thin. His gaze followed Mia until she disappeared into a cluster of servers near the side doors. The yellow of her dress vanished behind black uniforms and silver trays. And suddenly, Minjun wasn't in the ballroom anymore. He was 8 years old again, sitting on the cold floor of a cramped apartment while his mother stirred rice too thin to fill a bowl. He remembered the way hunger felt back then, not just pain, but distraction. How it made everything louder, brighter, meaner. He remembered learning how to ignore it. Watching Mia clutch her stomach had dragged that memory out of him like a blade. Minjun exhaled slowly and forced himself back into the present. Across the room, Sonia moved with rigid efficiency. She didn't look at him again. She focused on her work, posture straight, expression carefully neutral. Every step she took angled away from where he stood, as if distance itself could keep him from seeing her. But Minjun saw everything. He saw the tightness in her shoulders. The way she nodded too quickly when spoken to. The way her jaw clenched whenever she passed near his side of the room. She was afraid. Not of him alone, but of what proximity to him meant. 2 servers whispered near the bar, unaware of how easily Minjun could hear them. Told you she was new, one murmured. Last minute hire, the other replied. Apparently she works 3 jobs. Single mom. Minjun's head turned slightly, attention sharpening. Poor thing, the first continued. Always saying yes to extra shifts. Never complains. Yeah, well, she's not one of them, the second said, glancing toward the well-dressed guests. Doesn't belong in this crowd. Minjun felt something cold settle behind his ribs. Single mother. Works multiple jobs. Last-minute hire. None of it surprised him, and all of it did. His jaw tightened as the pieces began to form a shape he didn't want to name. He watched Sonia bend to speak to Mia near the service entrance, brushing a thumb across the child's cheek, murmuring something that made Mia nod solemnly. Sonia straightened, adjusted Mia's dress with careful hands, then sent her toward a quiet corner with a coloring book and strict instructions not to move. Mia obeyed. Mostly. She colored for a few minutes, legs swinging. Then she looked up again. Her eyes found Minjun across the room like they were drawn there. He felt it like a tug. Stop, he told himself. You're imagining patterns because you want them. But the way Mia watched him wasn't casual. It was familiar. A subordinate appeared at Minjun's side again, voice low. Sir. Minjun didn't look away from Mia. What is it? The host, the man said carefully. Connections confirmed. Not official, but close to the park syndicate. Minjun's gaze sharpened instantly. The park syndicate didn't host weddings out of goodwill. They hosted events to signal alliances, to test boundaries, to draw enemies into neutral spaces where violence could be disguised as coincidence. Minjun's jaw set hard. And Sonia? He asked. Not on any list, the man replied. She wasn't supposed to be here originally. Catering short-staffed. She was added this morning. Minjun felt the final piece click into place. Sonia and Mia weren't just emotionally vulnerable here. They were exposed. Anyone who recognized Minjun, and there were people in this room who could decide Sonia was leverage. Or worse, decide Mia was. Minjun's fingers curled slowly at his side. Across the ballroom, Sonia laughed politely at something a guest said, but her eyes flicked nervously toward the exits. Toward Mia. Toward him. She felt it too. The pressure. The wrongness. Minjun took a step forward. Then another. His men shifted almost imperceptibly, adjusting their positions to match his movement. No weapons drawn. No panic. Just readiness. Minjun's mind raced. If I walk away now, they might never be safe again. If I stay silent, someone else will decide their fate. He thought of Mia's small wave. The way she wiped her tears with the back of her knuckles. The impossible familiarity of her face. He told himself one last time that it meant nothing. And failed. Minjun stopped near the edge of the service corridor, close enough that Sonia would see him if she turned. He waited. Not as a boss. Not as a threat. But as a man who had already lost too much to keep lying to himself. When Sonia finally glanced his way, their eyes met again. Minjun lifted his chin slightly, just enough to signal intention. We need to talk. Sonia stiffened. Minjun didn't know yet how he would convince her. Or what it would cost. Or whether the truth he suspected would destroy all three of them. He only knew one thing with absolute clarity. He couldn't let her walk away again. Not tonight. Not with a child who looked too much like him. And as the music swelled and the wedding guests raised their glasses in celebration, Dong Minjun made a decision he hadn't made in years. No matter the cost, he would speak to Sonia. Minjun moved with the same patience he used before a storm. He didn't rush Sonia in the middle of the ballroom. He didn't grab her arm in front of guests. He didn't make a scene that would turn Mia into spectacle. He waited, watching the flow of the wedding like a chessboard, until Sonia slipped through the side doors toward the service corridor with an empty tray balanced on her palm. That was the opening. Minjun followed at a measured distance, his expression calm, his shoulders loose, as if he was simply stepping out for air. His men didn't crowd him. They fanned out, two near the corridor entrance, one drifting toward the kitchen passage, quiet, invisible, present. Sonia reached the hallway and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. The corridor behind the ballroom was dimmer, lined with cream wallpaper and framed photographs of the venue's history. Smiling couples from decades ago, frozen in happiness. The noise from the reception softened into a distant hum. Here, every footstep mattered. Sonia turned, and found Minjun already there. Her spine went rigid. The tray slipped slightly in her hands before she steadied it. No, she said immediately, voice sharp. Don't. Minjun closed the distance between them by only 2 steps. Close enough to be heard. Far enough to not feel like a cage. Sonia, he said, low. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. She angled her body as if to pass him. Minjun didn't move to block her. He only shifted, subtle, controlled, so she couldn't slip by without brushing against him. Sonia stopped short, furious. You always do this, she hissed. You show up, you decide what happens. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, eyes flashing. You don't get to corner me like this. I'm not trying to corner you. His voice tightened, not with anger but restraint. I'm trying to understand. Sonia let out a laugh that held no humor. Understand? You disappeared, Minjun. You vanished like I was nothing. Like I wasn't, she choked on the word, then forced it out. Like I wasn't your life. Minjun's jaw clenched. The corridor suddenly felt too small, too intimate. The air smelled faintly of citrus polish and something older, dust trapped behind picture frames. I didn't vanish because you meant nothing, he said quietly. I left because you meant everything. Sonia's eyes widened, then hardened again. Don't you dare. Minjun's gaze stayed steady, but something raw flickered behind it. I stayed away to protect you. Protect me. Sonia repeated, incredulous. You think you protected me by destroying me? Minjun's breath slowed, controlled. You didn't know what I was tangled in. You didn't know what they were capable of. I knew enough, Sonia snapped. I knew you were choosing them. I knew you looked me in the face and said you couldn't leave. I knew I was begging the man I loved, and he walked out anyway. Minjun's hand flexed once at his side, as if resisting the urge to reach for her and stop the words. If I had stayed. If you had stayed, maybe my life wouldn't have turned into a war, Sonia cut in. Her voice dropped, shaking now. I spent years looking over my shoulder. Years wondering if you were dead or if you just didn't care. Years rebuilding myself from the ashes you left behind. Minjun swallowed hard. I thought you moved on, he said, and the admission sounded like it cost him. I thought you found safety. I thought you'd be better without me. Sonia stared at him like he'd spoken a different language. Then, slowly, her expression broke. Not into softness, into pain. You thought I moved on, she whispered. While I was surviving. Her fingers tightened around the tray until her knuckles turned pale. She looked away for a second, as if the hallway might offer an escape. Then she looked back. And something in her face shifted, like a door unlatching. You want to understand. Sonia's voice was low now, dangerous in its honesty. Fine. Minjun's stomach tightened. Sonia took one shaky breath. Mia was born months after you disappeared. The words fell into the corridor like a body hitting water. Minjun didn't move. For a second, he couldn't. He heard the sentence again in his head, slower this time, as if his mind was trying to translate it into something possible. Mia was born months after you disappeared. His throat tightened so hard it hurt. Sonia, he breathed. Sonia's eyes shone, but no tears fell. I found out after you left. I tried to reach you. I went to places I wasn't supposed to go. I asked people who looked at me like I was already dead for asking. And then I realized something. Her voice sharpened. You weren't lost. You were gone on purpose. Minjun's face drained of color. Sonia's chest rose and fell fast. So I made a choice too. What choice? Minjun's voice barely worked. Sonia's gaze cut into him. I chose not to chase a man who chose power over us. Minjun blinked once, slowly, like he was fighting dizziness. He did the math without wanting to. The timeline snapped into place with brutal clarity. The final weeks they'd been together. The promises. The last night. The way she'd looked at him like he was her whole future. And then Mia's face. Mia's eyes. Mia's stubborn little knuckle wipe. His knees nearly betrayed him. Minjun reached back and braced a palm against the wall, steadying himself without making it obvious. In his world, weakness invited knives. Even here, with Sonia, instinct was law. But his voice cracked anyway. You never told me. Sonia's laugh came out broken. Told you? How? You disappeared into a world I couldn't follow without getting myself killed. And even if I could have found you, what would I have said? Her eyes burned. Congratulations, the man who chose the underworld over me is going to be a father. Minjun flinched. Sonia stepped closer, and for the first time her composure truly shattered. Do you know what it's like raising a child alone? She whispered fiercely. Working until your feet ache, smiling at strangers who don't see you, counting dollars at midnight and praying your baby doesn't get sick because you can't afford the doctor. Minjun's throat worked. His eyes looked wet, but he refused to let tears fall. He'd buried that weakness years ago. I didn't know, he said hoarsely. No, Sonia agreed. You didn't. Because you weren't there. Minjun opened his mouth, closed it again. Words felt useless. Sonia's voice lowered, steadier now, cold with protection. And you're not going to claim her. Minjun's head snapped up. Sonia. No, she cut in sharply. Listen to me. Mia deserves a normal life. Not your life. Not your enemies. Not your blood-soaked world. She deserves school and friends and laughter without fear. Minjun's jaw clenched, pain flaring in his eyes. She deserves her father. Sonya's gaze turned lethal. And what kind of father are you, Minjun? The question hit where it hurt most. Minjun couldn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know if he was capable of being anything else. Sonya stepped back, gripping the tray again like it anchored her. You helped her tonight, she said, voice tight. Thank you. Truly. But that doesn't give you rights. It doesn't rewrite what you did. Minjun stared at her, chest heaving with something he hadn't felt in years. Panic that wasn't about death, but about loss. He took a slow step toward her. Let me fix this. You can't, Sonya whispered. Not without breaking her. Minjun's hands curled into fists at his sides, nails biting skin. And then a faint buzz touched his ear. A vibration so small no one else would notice. Minjun's head tilted slightly. His earpiece crackled once. Then a voice, low and urgent, slipped through. Sir, his man said. We have movement. 2 unknowns entering through the east service door. Not staff. Eyes on you. Minjun's gaze sharpened instantly, the softness draining from him like water. The corridor that had held truth a second ago suddenly held something else. Danger. And Sonya, still shaking from confession, had no idea the worst part of the night was only beginning. The words in Minjun's earpiece didn't echo, but they landed with the weight of a gunshot. 2 unknowns. East service door. Not staff. Minjun didn't look at Sonya. He didn't react the way an ordinary man would. He only tilted his head a fraction, as if listening to music no one else could hear. The softness that had cracked his voice moments ago vanished. In its place, something older stepped forward. How long? Minjun murmured. Seconds, came the reply. They recognized you, sir. And her. Minjun's eyes flicked, sharp and assessing, not toward Sonya, but toward the ballroom beyond the corridor. Toward exits. Sight lines. Faces that were laughing too loudly, drinking too much, watching just a little too carefully. Sonya followed his gaze, unease crawling up her spine. What is it? She asked. What's happening? Minjun didn't answer immediately. He took half a step closer to her, not threatening, not intimate, protective in a way she hadn't seen before. This wedding, he said quietly, was never just a wedding. Sonya's stomach dropped. Minjun lifted a finger to his earpiece. Confirm host alignment. The response came fast. Park Syndicate adjacent. Secondary allies present. We're being tested. Minjun exhaled through his nose. A trap. Not designed to kill him outright. Too messy, too public. No. This was a pressure test. A show of reach. A message wrapped in silk and champagne. And Sonya, standing here, shaking, unaware, had just become the most dangerous variable in the room. Minjun turned back to her, eyes hard but voice controlled. I need you to do exactly what I say. Sonya bristled. You don't get to. This isn't about us, Minjun cut in softly. This is about Mia. That stopped her. Behind them, the ballroom doors opened briefly, releasing a wave of music and laughter before swinging shut again. Sonya's heart pounded. She didn't know why, but suddenly every sound felt too loud, every face too close. Minjun touched his earpiece again. Reposition. Quiet. His men moved without signal. One drifted toward the bar, blending in as a guest. Another adjusted his stance near the main exit, blocking it casually with his body. A third disappeared down a service hall. No panic. Just preparation. Sonya felt it then. The shift. The air tightening. The sense that something invisible had entered the room and was circling. Minjun, she whispered. You're scaring me. He met her eyes. Good. That means you'll listen. She swallowed hard. From the edge of the corridor, a small figure peeked out. Mama. Mia. Sonia turned sharply. Mia. I told you to stay. Mia's eyes darted between them, wide and searching. The noise of the wedding seemed to overwhelm her now. She pressed her fingers together, rubbing them nervously. Minjun knelt immediately, lowering himself to her level without hesitation. The act stunned Sonia, not because it was gentle, but because it was instinctive. Hey, Minjun said softly. Are you okay? Mia nodded, then shook her head. It's loud. Minjun understood. He glanced up briefly, catching Sonia's gaze. She needs to be somewhere quieter. Before Sonia could argue, the ballroom doors burst open again, and this time, Minjun didn't miss the two men stepping inside. They wore suits too sharp to be catering, eyes too alert to be guests. One scanned the room deliberately. The other smiled like he was enjoying himself. Minjun's jaw tightened. They're early. Sonia, he said calmly, rising. We're leaving. Sonia's pulse spiked. Leaving? I can't just. You can, Minjun said. And you will. Mia's small hand slipped into his without permission. The contact was light, but it froze him. Minjun looked down. Mia wasn't smiling now. She was afraid. Her fingers curled tighter. Something in Minjun's chest cracked open all the way. It's okay, he promised her quietly. I've got you. Sonia stared at their joined hands, panic and anger and something dangerously close to hope twisting together in her chest. One of Minjun's men appeared at the corridor entrance, pretending to check his phone. East door compromised, he murmured without moving his lips. They're watching. Minjun nodded once. His eyes flicked to the nearest exit. No running, he said under his breath. No sudden movements. He turned back to Sonia. Stay close to me. Don't argue. Don't look back. What happens if I don't? Sonia demanded, fear sharpening her voice. Minjun held her gaze. Then someone else will decide how tonight ends. Sonia's breath caught. In the ballroom, applause erupted as the bride and groom moved toward the center of the floor, unaware that the celebration had just become camouflage. Minjun guided Sonia and Mia forward, not toward the main exit, but toward a narrow service passage half hidden behind a curtain of flowers. His men closed in subtly, forming a moving shield. Mia stumbled once. Minjun caught her instantly, lifting her without breaking stride. Her arms went around his neck without thought, face pressing into his shoulder. Sonia's heart nearly stopped. She reached for Mia instinctively, but Minjun was already adjusting his grip, holding the child securely like he'd done it 100 times before. It's okay, he whispered to Mia again. I won't let anything happen. The corridor narrowed. The noise faded. The air grew cooler. Behind them, one of the suited men laughed, a little too loud. Another voice murmured something sharp and amused. Minjun didn't slow. Sonia, he said quietly, when I tell you to move, you move. No hesitation. She nodded, tears burning now. You better mean that. Minjun's lips curved faintly. I don't make promises I can't keep. A door ahead creaked open. Then, a sharp shout echoed from the ballroom. Someone had noticed. Minjun's men tensed. One hand drifted toward a concealed weapon. Minjun's gaze hardened, calculating distances, angles, consequences. Violence was no longer a possibility. It was approaching. Minjun tightened his hold on Mia, shielding her instinctively, and stepped forward into the narrowing space between silence and chaos. Behind him, Sonia whispered a prayer she hadn't spoken in years. And somewhere in the glittering room they were leaving behind, the knives finally began to show. The lights flickered. Just once, barely noticeable to the guests lost in champagne and music, but Minjun felt it like a pulse through his spine. Then the chandeliers went dark. For half a second, The grand ballroom was swallowed by shadow. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed nervously, assuming it was a harmless glitch. Min-jun didn't slow. "Now," he said calmly into his earpiece. The power returned almost immediately, soft lighting instead of full brilliance, but the damage was done. In that brief blackout, Min-jun's men moved. Not running. Not shouting. Surgical. Two guests near the bar were gently but firmly redirected away from the service corridor. A waiter found himself guided into the kitchen with a murmured apology. The floral curtain ahead shifted just enough to reveal the narrow passage beyond. Sonia felt it then, the unmistakable snap from tension to action. "What's happening?" she whispered, clutching the edge of Min-jun's coat as he carried Mia. "Extraction," Min-jun replied. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "Eyes down. Stay close." Mia buried her face against his shoulder, small fingers gripping his collar like it was the only solid thing left in the world. They moved through the service corridor as if it had been cleared just for them. Because it had. Behind them, a sharp voice cut through the music. "Min-jun." Min-jun didn't turn. He knew that voice. A man stepped into the corridor's mouth, tall and smiling, suit immaculate, eyes cold with recognition. Park Jae-hyun, one of the Park Syndicate's lieutenants. Not powerful enough to command a room, but dangerous enough to make a mess. "Well," Park said lightly, spreading his hands. "You always did know how to make an entrance." Min-jun stopped. The men around them froze, waiting. Sonia's heart slammed against her ribs. She instinctively reached for Mia, but Min-jun shifted the child higher against his chest, shielding her completely. Park's gaze flicked to Sonia. Then to Mia. And his smile widened. "So this is her," Park said. "Your weakness." The word landed like a challenge. Min-jun turned slowly, placing himself fully between Park and Sonia. His expression was calm, terrifyingly so. "She's not my weakness," Min-jun said. "She's off limits." Park chuckled. "You don't get to draw lines in my house." Min-jun's eyes hardened. "This stopped being your house the moment you tested me." Park took a step closer. Min-jun's men mirrored the movement instantly, bodies angling, hands ready but hidden. "You've changed," Park mused. "Bringing civilians into this." Min-jun didn't blink. "You brought knives to a wedding." The smile slipped from Park's face. Min-jun's voice dropped, carrying the weight of command. "Let us pass." Park's gaze flicked to Mia again, calculating. Dangerous. That was his mistake. Min-jun moved. It was fast, too fast for anyone watching to understand what happened. One moment Park was smirking, the next he was slammed back against the wall. The air punched from his lungs as Min-jun's forearm crushed his throat. Min-jun leaned in close, voice low enough that only Park could hear. "Touch them," Min-jun whispered, "and I will dismantle everything you love before sunrise." Park gasped, eyes wide now, not with fear of pain, but recognition of truth. Min-jun released him and stepped back like nothing had happened. Park slid down the wall, coughing, humiliated. "Clear," Min-jun said. His men surged forward, guiding Sonia through the corridor. Another door swung open, loading dock access, cold air rushing in. Behind them, the ballroom erupted. Not screams, confusion. Security shouting orders. Music cutting abruptly. Guests murmuring as suits with earpieces became visible for the first time. Min-jun stepped into the open space of the loading area and turned back toward the ballroom doors. He lifted his chin slightly. Every man who mattered in that room saw it. Recognition spread like wildfire. Whispers followed. "That's Dong Min-jun." "No way. We need to leave. Now." The illusion shattered. Phones disappeared. Smiles died. People backed away from the center of the room as if danger had suddenly been named out loud. Min-jun didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply stood there, child in his arms, eyes sweeping the room with ownership that needed no explanation. The wedding was over. Inside, Park struggled to his feet, fury burning behind his humiliation. But he didn't follow. No one did. Minjun turned and walked away. Outside, engines were already running. A black vehicle pulled up smoothly, doors opening. Sonia stood frozen for half a second, staring at Minjun like she didn't recognize him anymore. Not the man she'd loved, not the ghost she'd mourned, but something both terrifying and impossibly protective. "Get in," Minjun said gently. She did. Minjun placed Mia carefully into the seat beside her, buckling her in himself with hands that no longer shook. Mia looked up at him, eyes wide. "Is it over?" Minjun paused, then nodded. "For tonight." She reached out again, taking his hand. This time, he didn't let go. The door closed. The engine surged. The venue receded into the night like a bad dream. As the car pulled away, Sonia pressed her forehead against the glass, breath finally breaking into quiet sobs she could no longer hold back. Minjun sat opposite her, shoulders squared, gaze forward, but his hand remained where Mia held it. Behind them, the lights of the wedding vanished. Ahead, the road stretched dark and uncertain. But they were alive. Together. And for the first time since the night he'd walked away, Dong Minjun didn't feel like he was running. He felt like he was finally choosing where to stand. The car didn't stop until the city lights thinned into quiet stretches of road and shadow. When it finally slowed, the gate ahead opened without a sound. The vehicle passed through and rolled into a courtyard wrapped in high walls and muted security lights. No signage. No guards in uniform. Just stillness, the kind that only existed where chaos was expected but carefully kept out. Minjun waited until the engine cut before he moved. "We're safe," he said quietly. Sonia didn't answer right away. She sat frozen, one hand still braced on the seat, the other resting protectively over Mia's knee. Only when the door opened and cool night air brushed her face did she seem to realize they were no longer running. Inside, the safe house was warm and sparse. Clean lines. Neutral colors. Furniture chosen for comfort rather than display. The walls were thick, the windows reinforced, the silence deliberate. Minjun carried Mia inside without asking. The child didn't stir. He laid her gently on a wide bed in one of the back rooms, removing his jacket slowly, folding it at the foot of the mattress like it mattered. He pulled a light blanket over her small frame and stood there for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Mia slept deeply. No whimpers, no restless shifting. Just peace. For the first time that night, Minjun's breath caught. He hadn't seen sleep like that in years. Behind him, Sonia lingered in the doorway, arms crossed tightly over herself. She watched Minjun with an expression she didn't recognize in herself. Part anger, part fear, part something dangerously close to awe. "You can't keep doing this," she said softly. Minjun turned. "Doing what?" he asked. "Swooping in," Sonia replied, voice sharp again. "Making decisions. Dragging us into places like this." "This place is secure," Minjun said. "No one will come near her." Sonia laughed quietly. "You think that's the point?" Minjun hesitated. She stepped closer, lowering her voice instinctively, as if Mia might hear even in sleep. "Your world doesn't end at these walls. It follows you. Everywhere." Minjun nodded once. "I know." The admission surprised her. "You didn't know before," she pressed. "You thought you could protect people by disappearing." "I was wrong," he said simply. Sonia searched his face, looking for arrogance, for denial. She found neither. "I'm trapped," Minjun continued, eyes drifting back to the bed. "Everything I built. It owns me now. Every alliance, every threat. It's a cage I reinforced myself." "Then why stay in it?" Sonia demanded. His jaw tightened. "Because walking away isn't as simple as leaving a room. She scoffed. You walked away from me. Minjun winced, not dramatically, not defensively. Just honest pain. I never wanted her in this life, he said quietly. Never. Sonya's breath stuttered. I wanted something clean, Minjun went on. Something safe. I wanted her to grow up worrying about homework, not enemies. I didn't know about her, but even if I had, I wouldn't have wanted this. Sonya's anger faltered, replaced by exhaustion. And yet here we are. Yes, Minjun agreed. Because I failed. Silence settled between them, heavy but no longer hostile. Sonya moved closer to the bed, brushing Mia's hair back gently. Her voice softened despite herself. She hasn't slept like this in months. Minjun watched the tenderness in Sonya's hands. The way she memorized Mia's face like she was afraid it might disappear. She trusted you, Sonya said quietly. Tonight. That scares me. It scares me too, Minjun admitted. They stood there together, bound by a child neither of them was ready to name aloud. Minutes passed. Then Mia stirred. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, unfocused at first. She blinked, confused, then looked around the unfamiliar room. Mama, she murmured. I'm here, baby, Sonya said immediately, sitting on the edge of the bed. Mia's gaze drifted past her, found Minjun. Are you leaving? She asked sleepily. The question hit harder than any accusation Sonya had thrown. Minjun crouched beside the bed again, movements careful. No, he said. I'm staying. Mia studied his face as if testing the promise. Then she nodded once, satisfied. Okay, she whispered, already drifting back under. Minjun didn't move until her breathing evened out again. When he finally stood, something had settled in him, something quiet but unyielding. He looked at Sonya. I won't disappear again, he said. Not a plea. Not a boast. A vow. Sonya's eyes glistened, but she looked away. You don't get to promise her forever when you don't know what tomorrow looks like. Minjun nodded. Then I'll change tomorrow. Sonya frowned. What does that mean? Minjun glanced toward the darkened window, where faint city lights flickered beyond reinforced glass. It means, he said slowly, some parts of my empire won't survive the night. Sonya turned sharply. Minjun. I won't put her at the center of my war, he continued. So I'll end the parts that bring the war to her. The decision was already made. Sonya could see it in his posture, the way his shoulders squared, the way his gaze steadied. You can't dismantle a life like yours without blood, she whispered. I know, Minjun replied. But I can choose where it spills. Sonya swallowed hard. Minjun reached for his phone. As he stepped away to make the call, Sonya looked back at Mia, sleeping peacefully between unfamiliar walls, and wondered whether the most dangerous thing Minjun had ever done wasn't becoming a kingpin, but choosing to stop being one. Behind the closed door, Minjun spoke quietly into the dark. Begin transfers, he said. Cut loose anything that leads back here. He ended the call and rested his forehead briefly against the wall. For the first time in years, Dong Minjun wasn't preparing for war. He was preparing for change. The first cut was quiet. No gunfire. No shouting. Just a phone call placed before dawn, Minjun's voice calm as he instructed men who had once sworn loyalty with blood to begin transferring assets they didn't yet understand they would never control again. Accounts shifted. Territories reassigned. Routes abandoned. By sunrise, rumors were already moving faster than facts. Sonya woke to the sound of low voices beyond the reinforced walls. She sat up on the couch, heart pounding, expecting chaos, but the safe house remained still. Minjun stood near the kitchen counter, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, speaking softly into his phone like this was any other morning. Yes, he said. Effective immediately. A pause. No. That operation ends today. Another pause, longer this time. I'm aware of the consequences. He ended the call and set the phone down without ceremony. Sonia studied him from across the room. His face looked different in daylight. Less sharp. More tired. But there was something else there too, resolve stripped of arrogance. You're dismantling it, she said quietly. Minjun didn't look at her. Parts of it. That's not how empires work. No, he agreed. That's how sacrifices work. She didn't respond right away. She watched him instead, watched the way his hand stilled when the phone vibrated again, watched him silence it without answering. Outside, the city continued as if nothing monumental was happening. Inside, Minjun's world was cracking open. Mia wandered in a few minutes later, hair still messy from sleep, dragging a crayon box she'd found somewhere in the safe house. She paused when she saw Minjun, then smiled cautiously. Hi, she said. Good morning, Minjun replied. She studied him, then looked to Sonia as if asking permission. Sonia nodded once. Mia shuffled closer and held up the crayons. Can you draw? Minjun hesitated. It was such a small question. Harmless. I can try, he said. They sat at the low table together. Mia pushed a sheet of paper toward him, watching closely as if she expected him to fail. Minjun held the crayon awkwardly at first, then relaxed, sketching slow lines, simple shapes. A house. Stairs. A window. Mia leaned in, eyes lighting up. That's like the ones I draw. Minjun's chest tightened. You like houses. They're safe, Mia said matter-of-factly. Minjun nodded and added a door to the drawing. They should always have a way out too. Mia considered that. Okay. She picked up a crayon and added flowers along the edges, humming softly. Sonia watched from the doorway, something unfamiliar blooming behind her ribs. Trust, thin, cautious, fragile, but real. Later, as Minjun stepped into the hallway to take another call, Sonia overheard enough to know the cost was growing. You're making a mistake. You're giving up leverage. You'll regret this. Minjun's responses were brief. Final. When he returned, Sonia didn't hide the fear in her eyes. They're not going to let you walk away. I'm not walking, Minjun said. I'm stepping aside. That's worse, she whispered. Minjun crouched beside Mia again, watching her draw flowers larger than the house. Power is loud, he said quietly. Walking away is an insult. Mia glanced up. Are you mad? Minjun smiled faintly. No. She hesitated, then asked softly, Can I call you uncle? The word hung in the air. Minjun's breath caught. Sonia stiffened. Mia frowned, suddenly uncertain. Or, is that not okay? Minjun met Sonia's eyes. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. She waited. Minjun turned back to Mia. You can call me whatever feels right, he said gently. Mia thought for a second, then nodded. Okay, uncle. The word settled into Minjun's chest like something permanent. That night, the threat arrived without warning. A message appeared on Minjun's phone. No number, no signature. Kings who abandon their thrones don't retire. They bleed. Minjun stared at the screen, then locked the phone and slipped it into his pocket. Sonia saw his expression change. What is it? Minjun looked at her, at Mia curled up beside her with crayons scattered like confetti, and felt the finality of his choice settle in his bones. An answer, he said. And for the first time in his life, Dong Minjun didn't reach for his crown. He reached for his family instead. The storm did not come the way Sonia expected. There was no gunfire in the night. No shouting at the gates. No chaos tearing through the walls of the safe house. Whatever confrontation followed Minjun's choice happened somewhere beyond her reach. Quiet, decisive, and final in the way only power truly understood could be. By morning, it was over. Minjun returned just after sunrise. Sonia heard the door before she saw him. She rose from the couch instinctively, heart racing, bracing herself for blood or bruises or the kind of exhaustion that meant survival had come at too high a cost. But Minjun stepped inside alone, coat draped over one arm, his movement slower now, not weakened, but unburdened. "You're alive," Sonia whispered. Minjun met her gaze and nodded once. "It's done." She searched his face. "And them?" "They won't come," he said. "Not for me. Not for you." "What did you give up?" she asked. Minjun looked past her, to the small bedroom where Mia still slept curled beneath a blanket, thumb tucked against her cheek. "Everything they could use to reach us," he said quietly. "Including me." Sonia let out a breath she'd been holding for years. The days that followed felt strange in their simplicity. No guards hovering at every corner. No hurried whispers. Just quiet mornings, shared meals, and cautious routines stitched together by necessity and hope. Minjun no longer took calls in secret. When his phone rang, he answered openly, or didn't answer at all. The empire faded into something distant, like a dream remembered without longing. On the third day, Sonia stood with Mia in a small public park not far from the safe house. Children played nearby, laughter rising and falling like birdsong. Sonia hadn't realized how much she'd missed normal noise until it surrounded her again. Minjun stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, watching. Mia tugged at Sonia's sleeve. "Can I go play?" Sonia hesitated, then nodded. "Stay where I can see you." Mia ran toward the swings, then stopped. She turned back. Minjun looked up just as Mia walked toward him instead, small sneakers scuffing the pavement. Without a word, she reached out and slipped her hand into his. It was simple, natural, public. Sonia's breath caught. Minjun froze, stunned by the weight of it, not the pressure of her grip, but the choice behind it. Mia looked up at him, eyes steady, unafraid. "You're not leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Minjun replied. His voice didn't waver. "I'm not." Mia nodded, satisfied, and tugged him toward the swings like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Minjun followed. People passed them without a second glance. No one bowed. No one whispered his name. No one feared him. For the first time, Dong Minjun was invisible. And it felt like freedom. Later, as the sun dipped lower and the park emptied, Minjun knelt in front of Mia to ready her shoelace. His movements were careful, reverent, as if this simple task mattered more than any deal he'd ever closed. "Mia," he said softly. She looked down at him. "Yes." "If I asked you something important, would you think about it first?" She smiled. "Okay." Minjun swallowed. He glanced up at Sonia, at the woman who had survived without him, who had protected their child with ferocity and love, who had every reason to walk away. She didn't nod. She didn't stop him. She waited. Minjun turned back to Mia. "Would you let me be your father? Not just uncle. Not just someone who stays nearby. But your dad. For real." Mia blinked. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck without hesitation. "Yes," she said simply. Minjun closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he knelt without calculating danger. Without guarding his back. Without preparing for betrayal. He knelt because love required humility. Sonia covered her mouth, tears slipping free at last. They left the park together. No security detail, no armored cars. Just three figures walking down a quiet street, hands linked, steps unhurried. The future ahead of them was uncertain. There were legal battles to fight. Trust to rebuild. Scars that wouldn't fade quickly. But it was honest. And as they stepped inside their new home that night, Sonia glanced back at Mia, at her laughter, her lightness, her safety. There was no crying. Only warmth. Only peace. Only the quiet miracle of a family choosing one another.